Thank you, President. Thank you, Chancellor Christian, for the introduction. And I definitely resonate with your comments about the unity, the camaraderie, and the collaboration that is happening across our district. And we are grateful for the ability for us to come together. So I would like to introduce Dean Richard McCrow. And he has a really powerful story to share, which I thought was very relevant for our conversation today. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Dean McCrow, and then I'll hop on after his remarks with some thoughts of my own.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And it's certainly an honor to be here with such a great group of folks, and especially with our VP of Student Services across all the campuses. I know you all, and I think you're a great bunch of VPs, and so it is truly an honor to be here. If you could do me a favor, and even though I love that picture of myself, and it keeps popping up all over the place, if you could go ahead and drop the PowerPoint just for a second, and then I'll have you bring it right back up, because I do want to sort of get a little vulnerable and tell a story of mine in the past year and a half, and what has sort of transpired in my life. And those who know me know I'm generally I like to keep things to myself and don't like to put things out there. But I think in the interest of the betterment of all, especially as a dean at Bakersfield College, I think it's good to sort of tell my story so that folks get the general idea that they're not alone. I'll apologize up front. My story has sort of a surprise ending, and I'll sort of explain that. But the year started off like everybody else when we went into the COVID mode, and quickly we closed down campuses, moved students around, and just really jarred everybody's life. And I ended up here on my patio, and not realizing that's where I would spend the next 18 plus months. And it has been very different for me. But I do say that as life went on, and like all of our lives continued to move on, at the beginning of COVID-19, I lost my mom. And that was just sort of one thing that happened shortly thereafter. I lost my father, and things just kept transpiring and kept moving forward. And I would deal with the issue and then move on to the sort of the next. And then it wasn't 8 months into it that my daughter was diagnosed with colon cancer. I will tell you right now that she's doing extremely well, and the prognosis is very good. And so I don't want you there. But and then my son, whose whole family during the height of COVID, before we had vaccines, his whole family, including my 1-year-old granddaughter, contracted COVID. And so as I was sitting there and thinking about how this year and a half, it doesn't feel like we've been through a year and a half. I think if you took all my life's events and they were just sort of part of that, and you go to work and you see friends and colleagues, and you're able to discuss these things, but it seems like they were all just compiled into a very short period of time. And I've got sort of this balance of appreciating empathy, but got into this sort of mode of my own. And I think it was sort of protective to just tell people that I'm fine, and I think we hear that a lot when people go through trauma, and that discussion of individuals sort of protecting themselves, because it is painful to talk about. It is painful to talk about death in your family, and all the different things that was going on at the same time as we're all worrying about our students and worrying about colleagues and the things that we're going through. And I will tell you that my colleagues were exceptional during these times. But I do want to point out two really simple things that sort of changed how I was able to carry on, and the resilience that I was able to. And one comes from one of my colleagues. It was just such a simple thing. and it was following the death of my brother. His niece, or my niece, my brother's daughter, passed away in her sleep. She was 32 years old and had two daughters. So my worry about my brother was obviously in there, and it was a moment, though, that was probably the hardest death that I had to deal with. And Jennifer Johnson, one of my colleagues, we were talking about a project that we were working on. And then I explained to her, almost in a I'm fine way, that my niece had just passed away. And she just looked at me, and this was, of course, the Zoom look. We weren't in person, but she just looked at me and she just said, you know what? You need to address the trauma in your life. Let me take this. And so she took the project from me, and without even asking permission, but it was a simple act of recognizing that something happened to me. And it made me feel like something really did happen to me. Like I kept putting things internal and carrying them down. And I also had an opportunity in which, with all the stuff going on, I admit that there was a lot of anxiety and depression that was starting to set in on my own. And I did leverage the employee assistance program and sought the assistance of a therapist. And therapy, I discovered quickly that it's not what I ever thought it would be. I actually call it now the massage for my brain, and will continue to leverage that for the rest of my life. But my therapist, when I talked about my parents passing away, made a comment about me being orphaned, and just that, such a strange thing for an adult to hear. But it was, again, an acknowledgement of something I was going through during this time of COVID, that there was trauma, there is trauma. And so I've started to recognize, another colleague, Bill Mosley, who had a conversation with all the deans one day about mindfulness, really getting down to my own self-awareness about who I am, what I'm going through, and recognizing my responsibility to myself and taking time out. I am sort of the kind of person that doesn't want to go away from work, wants to stay and keep trucking on through it. I think that's okay, but not at the expense of hurting others. I have discovered in some of the discussions that I've had with colleagues in our behavioral science area that, when we talk about depression and anxiety, just as we talk about COVID and other viruses like the flu, these things are contagious. And when I was told that if depression and anxiety are just as contagious as the virus, then we've got something else that we have to consider. And so if you could show the slides real quick. So in our conversations as we're going through, recognizing that I had my own things to deal with, but there were resources out there. The Employee Assistance Program is one that I recognize. I highly recommend. It's very easy to use, and HR can give you the information for that. But I also, one of our faculty, one of our department chairs, said that she had recognized some of her own faculty were having troubles in adjusting. And so just a little bit of research and some numbers, because we don't get away with out talking about numbers. But if you look at the lower right-hand corner, when we talk about the COVID time, you can see that, up until June of 2019, about 11% of adults reported symptoms. This is actually reporting symptoms, going to the physician or seeing a psychologist and reporting that they're exhibiting symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorder. 11%. And then in January of 2020, just in that very short time frame, 41.1% of adults reported the same symptoms. That's a 30% increase in that time of COVID. And so, do we have something to be concerned about? If you're looking to your right or your left, if you're on the Zoom or if you're in room with others, do recognize that the chances are that the individuals sitting close to you have some sort of disorder going on that involves anxiety and depression. If you look at the graph to the top of adults reporting the same types of symptoms during the COVID-19 pandemic, that first chart, the first graph there, the adults 18 to 24, our biggest population has the largest percentage of adults reporting symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorder. So you start to recognize that not only do we have responsibilities to ourselves and others, but especially to our students, because we are talking about our student population. And included in that graph on the left, immediately when you talk about race and ethnicity, you see that the Hispanic population, our largest target population, reports 61% of worrying about getting this virus. And I understand, even though this data here is about into its fourth month with the Delta variant, that worry about family and self and the coronavirus is getting larger. Next slide, please. And I did, want to sort of, there's a lot of resources out there when we're talking about that. A lot of individual resources. We have our health insurance. We have all the different things that we can access. But something unusual that we did, and this came from the department chair that was worried about her faculty, is to establish a course that sort of develops the resiliency skills that we all can leverage. If you look at this course right here, and I will tell you that we've made this course available on demand for departments. And so it's the one nice thing that was sort of a side benefit of the course is our psychologists that are teaching the course, they tapped into the traditional strategies one can use for building resiliency during trauma and during tough times, and put this together. And these are just some of the quick key points from the student learning outcomes. But what really sort of the side benefit, and I'll tell you, this course is not therapy. I want to make sure that is something that's upfront. But a side benefit of it is the students that enrolled in the class and had the chance to interact. And most of the courses that we offered were online, but there was moments and chances for the students to interact with each other. That the greatest thing that came out of it was the interaction and discussion of personal experiences, and being able to put the word out there with colleagues and other students. And it really was they saw that as a strong benefit of the course, in addition to just learning some of the scientific proven methods of developing your own resiliency. Now, this course is available. We've made it available to all BC departments. We are working on an iteration for some of our public servants, like our police departments and fire departments, and talking about building a course that will support them following trauma, recognizing that these services endure a lot of trauma, and that this would be something that benefits them. But I tell you, it is something too that we would make available to all the colleges, both to enroll at a Bakersfield College course, but also if you were interested in developing a course for your own college, we'd be more than willing to give the time and effort to help you get this on your books and then offer it to your populations. And then so finally, just to sort of to close out, I said there was a sort of an end to this story, and you can drop the slide. It was, with just as much enthusiasm as each one of you in coming back, going into meetings and strategic planning sessions and getting ready for this week and the start of our semester. Of course, Monday, I start work and started getting an itch in my throat and start sneezing and coughing, and the allergies and the smoke were really getting to me. And but then around Monday night, started feeling sort of feverish. Went ahead and got a COVID test, and wouldn't you know, just sort of tap out my ear as I start coming back that I tested positive, and have the luxury of sitting back on my patio again and operating out of here. And if it wasn't for the flexibility, I think that we've learned, it would probably be a bigger problem. But it is truly exciting, and I'm surrounded by colleagues that definitely care about both my physical and mental well-being, and both with humor and with compassion have reached out to me and have been a great support. So with that, I sort of top it off. I hope I didn't take too much of your time for the other presenters, and I'm ready to pass it on, Manny.
Thank you, Richard. Very powerful story. And on behalf of the more than 200 participants in today's webinar, we just want to thank you for your vulnerability, for your honesty. Our heart goes out to you and to your family for just the incredible loss and the difficult situations that you had to deal with this past year. You continue to be an example for us all. As a friend, personally, I have benefited so much from the way that you approach life. And for those who don't know Dean McCrow very well, he is a caretaker at heart. He is a first responder when there is a need. He is the first to be there to meet that need. And his story for me is a powerful reminder that even the caretakers, even the helpers need help. And that's why your story resonates with us all. As we seek to support our students, we also seek to support each other as colleagues across the district. Listening to Richard's story, to me, is a reminder that we are integrated beings. We are holistic in our very essence, in our nature. It's mind, body, and our spirit. And it's so easy to focus on what is visible. It's so easy for us just to kind of focus on the body, to look at someone and just make the assumption that they are fine because they look fine. Elizabeth Keel in the chat room made kind of alluded to the hidden stories that we all carry. And that is so true, that there are stories within us that require some support. And how can we provide that to our students in a way that meets their needs? I think one of the ways that we can do it is that we can destigmatize mental wellness and emotional self-care. We can norm that. And as we heard time and time again, anxiety and depression are on the rise because of our conditions and our situation. How do we make that conversation a normal, okay kind of conversation to have? As social beings, we grow, we learn, we develop in community. We were designed to live in community, and as a result of that, we rejoice with each other in community, we hurt with each other in community, and we heal with each other in community. And to reach out to our students and to allow them the permission to heal with us rather than feel like they have to suffer in silence, I think it's a very freeing experience for them. The other thing that comes to mind is the idea of formative intervention versus summative intervention. How can we provide timely support and help to our students at the early onset, rather than waiting until we are too far down the road? I once heard it said that a plane leaving Heathrow Airport in London, England, bound for LaGuardia Airport in New York City, if after takeoff, that plane is off course by only 2 degrees, right? 2 degrees is not a lot. But if it continues on that path uncorrected, it will end up somewhere close to Norfolk, Virginia, which is a good 360 miles away from New York City. That's a long walk for all those passengers who have to get off at Norfolk when they're bound for New York. But yet it would have been such an easy correction for the pilot to have made early on in the journey. I bring that up as an example of early interventions and making those formative connections with individuals when we see the issue? How can we provide support early on in their journey? I think it's really important for us as individuals when we struggle to reach out for help. But when we see individuals who are struggling, to also reach in to help, to provide that care that they need. And as we look around our campuses and as we see our students, keep in mind that we have, each of us carries that hidden stories, those hidden stories. When we have the opportunity to reach in, let's go ahead and do that. And let's just norm the conversation that it's okay for us to struggle and that we will heal together in community. Not too long ago, when I was kind of going through a bit of a rough spot myself, President Dadaboy did just that for me. He reached in and he provided that formative intervention for me. And he said, Manny, you doing okay? And my response to him was, nothing is wrong, but something isn't right. I didn't feel that I was hurting enough to reach out, but something just didn't feel quite right to me. And it just made me wonder how many other individuals have a similar kind of a story. You know, there are others who are hurting more than I am. So therefore I don't deserve any kind of attention or help or support or anything of that nature. And yet we all do, we're all struggling together. So my encouragement to everyone is to look for those hidden stories, as Elizabeth mentioned in the chat, find ways to intervene and to provide that support.